King Charles had prepared himself for another difficult message from his younger son. What he had not prepared for was seeing Prince William's title placed beneath an order William had never approved. Within minutes, a routine security alert turned into a full royal emergency. Harry was waiting outside a restricted Windsor entrance, demanding access to a private strategy meeting, and the authority he presented appeared to come directly from the future king. Then Charles read the final line. But before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure you subscribe to Royal Zone so you never miss a single update. Charles felt the anger rise before anyone in the room had spoken a single word. The Windsor meeting had been arranged to divide future royal duties and protect the monarchy from confusion during a fragile moment. The Prince of Wales was the title held by the direct heir to the throne, and using it on an official instruction could make palace staff believe the future king had personally approved the order. Harry had no invitation. Every proposed visit required confirmation through security and the royal household, the staff structure that manages all palace business. The king read the authorization carefully. It stated that Harry was entering on behalf of the Prince of Wales. William had signed nothing, sent no message, and did not even know his brother was approaching Windsor. Charles gripped the table. "Who gave him permission to use my son's name?" he demanded. No one answered. Harry had not simply requested entry. He had arrived carrying borrowed authority. Outside the entrance, Harry refused to move. He told the security officer that his family could not exclude him forever, and insisted that William's position should protect him, not become another wall blocking his way. The officer held firm, but the younger prince's voice hardened. He believed he was forcing a conversation. Inside, his father believed he was challenging the crown itself. William arrived later and examined the order in complete silence. The future king recognized phrases from an older internal communication, one that had been used during a private attempt to arrange contact between the two brothers. Someone had copied that wording carefully enough to make the authorization look entirely genuine. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. A private family promise had been turned into an official royal command. Charles ordered the gates kept closed. He instructed staff to trace every message, every copied phrase, and every person connected to the document, before Harry spoke to anyone inside. Then the first discovery made the crisis deeply personal. Harry had been relying on a promise made months earlier, one William believed had already been taken back. As Charles demanded answers and Harry remained outside the gates, the crisis stopped being a question about entry. It became something far more painful. Which brother believed he had been betrayed first? Behind the fury stood three men, each carrying three very different wounds. Charles saw a family fracture turning into a real constitutional danger. William saw his authority taken and used without his consent. Harry saw a final door closing directly in his face. None of them believed he was the true aggressor. Yet only one title had been misused, and only one man would be forced to decide whether family blood still deserved protection. Charles had spent years trying to separate the father from the monarch. Every appeal from Harry pulled those two identities back together, forcing him to choose between private love and public duty. This time, the danger was far greater. The Prince of Wales was not merely an honored family title. It identified the direct heir to the throne, and instructions issued in that name could influence security access, official schedules, and the everyday decisions of palace staff. William sat alone with the copied authorization resting on the table before him. He read every single phrase, searching for some innocent explanation. But the wording was too careful. Harry knew exactly which expressions would make the order sound official. The future king slowly turned the paper face down. His brother had not simply asked for help. He had used the authority William had spent years learning to carry. Harry waited in a secured reception room after officers moved him away from the gate. Anger kept him upright, but shock had begun to break through. He told one officer that he had not stolen power. He insisted he was acting on a promise William had once made. The officer gave no response, leaving the younger prince alone with the growing fear that the promise no longer existed. Charles soon received fragments of old messages discussing a possible private meeting between the brothers. Those messages did not grant Harry entry, yet placed in the right order, they could create the impression that William was actually expecting him. The king understood immediately why this mattered. A private family exchange had been carefully reshaped into something palace staff might easily mistake for official approval. William finally admitted the painful truth. Months earlier, he had offered Harry a confidential conversation at Windsor, but only under strict conditions. A confidential conversation meant a private discussion kept completely away from public statements, recordings, and palace announcements. That invitation had disappeared after details from another exchange escaped the family and reached outside circles. Charles entered his elder son's room without any advisors. He remained standing and asked whether any part of Harry's claim could possibly be defended. William looked at the forged authorization, then met his father's eyes. "Not the part where he used my title," he answered. That single sentence settled the immediate question, but it opened a much older wound. To understand why Charles's anger became so instant and so intense, the palace had to go back to the night Harry had been clearly warned never to invoke William's office again. Months before the Windsor gates were closed, William had offered Harry one final private opportunity. There would be no cameras, no public statement, and no palace announcement. Just two brothers in a small room, confronting years of accusations and long silences. But the conversation ended with a warning so direct that neither man could possibly misunderstand it. Harry left believing the door still remained open. William left completely convinced it had been locked shut. Charles had pushed for the meeting because he feared the family feud was no longer only personal. It was threatening future royal duties, public trust, and the balance of the monarchy itself. William agreed, but only on one clear condition. The conversation would remain entirely separate from official palace business. He attended as Harry's brother, not as the Prince of Wales, the title held by the direct heir, and used only when royal authority is formally exercised. William began carefully. He told Harry that family contact might still be possible, if private conversations remained truly private, and no promise was ever converted into public pressure. Harry listened, then asked for far more. He wanted the future king to restore his access, secure him an official role, and overrule the household staff who had blocked his previous requests. The mood in the room changed instantly. William pushed his chair back and told his brother that personal affection could not be converted into official power. He warned Harry never to use their private relationship as proof of royal authorization. The prince understood exactly why that line mattered. One false claim made in his name could confuse staff, weaken security decisions, and make personal family promises appear equal to commands from the heir to the throne. Harry answered with years of built-up anger. He said William had inherited the position, the protection, and the right to decide who belonged inside the family circle. He accused his brother of hiding personal resentment behind protocol, the formal system of royal rules and procedures used to control access and official conduct. The future king rejected that accusation entirely. He said the rules were protecting the crown from becoming a weapon in their own private fight. Harry left with more than bitterness. According to a documented internal account, later reviewed by Charles, he kept a printed scheduling note carrying the heading of William's office. The note only confirmed that a private discussion had once been considered. It granted no entry and promised no royal role whatsoever. Yet months later, its wording became the entire foundation of the order presented at Windsor. Charles had never known the paper had survived. William believed every copy had been collected, making its return feel calculated rather than simply desperate. The prince opened the door himself and delivered his final words clearly. "You may speak to me as my brother. You may never speak for me as the heir." Harry walked away without answering. Now the same language had returned to Windsor, and Charles ordered Harry brought inside, not as a prince reclaiming his rightful place, but as a son required to explain why he had crossed the one boundary William had made impossible to misunderstand. When Harry finally entered the room, no one welcomed him. Charles stood behind the table. William remained near the window. The disputed authorization lay between them, like evidence in a trial. There were no aides present to soften the language, and no cameras to encourage restraint. Harry had demanded a path back into the royal family. Instead, he found himself facing a father whose anger had moved well beyond disappointment, and a brother who would no longer defend him. Harry had been allowed inside only after surrendering his phone and accepting one condition. The meeting promised no restored access, no duties, no restored status, and no future negotiations. Charles had chosen a small private room rather than a formal chamber, because he wanted his son to answer as family before the matter became officially disciplinary. A disciplinary decision meant an official response carrying lasting consequences for royal access and conduct. The king placed the authorization directly in front of Harry. He asked whether his younger son had knowingly approved the use of William's title. Harry did not deny it. He said the prince had once promised him a private route back, and argued that he had only acted on a door already opened. Charles struck his palm flat against the table. The sound ended every excuse. He declared that a brother's personal invitation could never become an order from the heir to the throne. Harry went completely silent. The king's fury came from more than a broken rule. He saw private family love being reshaped into public power, and he knew that allowing it even once could permanently weaken every future command issued in William's name. William finally turned toward his brother. He accused Harry of taking one single moment of compassion and rebuilding it as official authority. The future king reminded him that the old invitation had conditions, clear limits, and absolutely no connection to official royal access. Harry answered that compassion without any real action was simply another form of rejection. He said William had offered hope, then hidden behind the office the moment that hope became inconvenient. Harry then revealed exactly how the order had been created. In a recorded account made during the confrontation, he admitted that a former intermediary, familiar with palace correspondence, had reconstructed the format of the document. The helper knew precisely how royal messages were arranged, and believed staff would obey the title before ever questioning its source. Charles demanded the name immediately. Harry refused. He said exposing that person would destroy the last remaining connection, still willing to help him return to the family. The king removed his glasses and placed them quietly beside the document. His voice became very low. He warned Harry that protecting that name would now count as another deliberate choice made against the family. William looked down again. A reference number appeared at the bottom of the page, tied to a dormant office account, an old royal administrative system that should have been fully disabled years earlier. Harry's confession had exposed the emotional betrayal, but the forgotten account revealed something far more dangerous. The attempt had reached deeper into the royal system than anyone had first understood. Harry may have carried the document, but he did not control the institution behind it. Within the monarchy, a title only holds real power when it is recognized by the people trusted to act upon it. Charles now had to determine whether his younger son had merely imitated authority, or whether someone still inside the royal machinery had quietly opened a hidden channel for him. The answer would decide whether this remained a painful family rupture or became a serious breach of the crown itself. Charles held the highest household authority as sovereign, the reigning monarch with final control over all royal operations. Yet William controlled his own office, correspondence, scheduling approvals, and every official use of the Prince of Wales designation. Royal security required more than a famous name. Staff had to match protected records, verified contacts, and current approvals before opening any restricted entrance. That safeguard had stopped Harry's order from becoming an automatic command. William felt the violation personally. He told his father that private forgiveness would mean absolutely nothing if the office of the heir could still be copied and manipulated at will. The future king was not protecting personal pride. He was protecting a chain of authority that staff depended upon during security decisions, public duties, and genuine emergencies. Charles hesitated before ordering a full internal search. He knew the investigation could expose former employees, buried loyalties, and the private contact routes he had once preserved in case Harry needed to reach him. Those channels had been created purely out of love. Now they threatened to become evidence of institutional weakness. The king sat beside his senior private secretary, the senior aide who manages royal correspondence, decisions, and access to the monarch, as the dormant account history appeared on a secure screen. When Harry's name appeared inside an archived contact chain, Charles closed his eyes. The discovery hurt deeply, because it connected his son to a route that should no longer have existed. Still, he ordered the search to continue. The reference number belonged to a transitional account once used while William's household structure was being reorganized. It had never issued a valid authorization, but its old templates remained accessible to a former administrative contractor. A documented message review showed that the contractor had contacted Harry's intermediary 3 days before the attempted entry. They had discussed wording, formatting, and which royal title would receive the fastest response from palace staff. Charles made the decision without any further delay. He signed an immediate directive disabling every dormant account and suspending all informal communication routes connected to Harry. A directive was a binding written instruction requiring palace staff to act at once. Harry expected punishment. He expected fury. He did not expect his father to erase the last hidden private path between them. The systems were sealed within minutes, yet the most devastating consequence did not appear on any screen. It appeared on Harry's face, when he realized the final private passage to Charles had completely disappeared. Harry had entered Windsor, believing that his physical presence would force a conversation the palace could no longer avoid. Instead, every minute inside stripped away another connection. His informal contact was suspended. His access request was formally rejected. The old account was permanently erased. Then came the order he had feared most. He would leave through the same secured entrance, under escort, with no private meeting scheduled, and no assurance that Charles would ever receive another appeal from him. The attempted return had produced the exact opposite result. Charles's directive took effect before the confrontation had even fully ended. Security teams received clear orders to reject any future request built on inherited titles, old correspondence, private family language, or verbal promises that could not be independently verified. William's office issued a sealed internal clarification, a private instruction sent only to authorized staff, stating that no one could ever use the prince's authority without direct digital confirmation from his current senior team. Harry heard the decision in complete silence. He had carried a personal appeal for his father, but the meeting was ending before he could even present it. The anger drained from his face and gave way entirely to disbelief. The entire attempt had been judged through the false authority attached to William's name. He had come seeking entry. Instead, he had made every future request harder to trust. The Duke asked Charles for 10 minutes alone. His voice had lost all its force. But the king refused. He said no private conversation could take place, while Harry continued protecting the intermediary who had helped misuse the future king's title. The refusal cut far deeper because it came from a father standing only a few steps away. Harry reached into his jacket and removed a folded letter. He held it for several long seconds, then returned it unopened. His hand trembled slightly as he asked whether Charles intended to read it at all. The monarch answered quietly. The letter would be accepted, but only through formal channels, the official process used to record and review serious requests. For the very first time, Harry's private words to his father would have to travel through the same system as an institutional petition. Love had not disappeared, but access to it had been placed behind formal procedure. Harry finally gave the intermediary's name in a recorded account taken before his departure. The disclosure confirmed that the person had once worked close enough to William's household to understand private formatting and old office language. A security officer opened the door. Harry stepped forward, then stopped when the lock engaged firmly behind him. William remained inside. He did not come forward to say goodbye. Later that evening, Charles found the folded letter left on the table, despite his earlier refusal to accept it. The official answer had already been delivered. But the abandoned letter created one final private test. Could Charles separate the pain of a father from the duty of a king? Long after the advisors had all departed, Charles returned alone to the room where the confrontation had taken place. The authorization was gone, collected as official evidence. Harry's letter remained. For the first time that entire day, there were no officials waiting for a decision and no security officers guarding the door. Only a father, a son's unread words, and the quiet knowledge that compassion could not undo what had already happened. Charles opened the letter, but he did not read it alone. The king asked William to join him after the household had gone completely quiet. No secretary, lawyer, advisor, or security official entered with him. Charles made one thing absolutely clear before unfolding the page. Reading the letter would not reverse the access decision. It was a personal act, entirely separate from the institutional response, meaning the official punishment already imposed by the crown. Charles began reading aloud. Harry admitted that he had used William's title because he genuinely believed a request carrying only his own name would never actually reach the family. The words did not defend the act. They exposed the deep fear beneath it. Harry believed he had become so powerless that only borrowed authority could force his father and brother to listen. William felt the anger return, but it no longer stood entirely alone. The future king was deeply unsettled by the thought that Harry truly believed he had no voice left inside his own family. He said desperation could explain the decision, but it could never excuse it. His title had been used as a tool, and private pain could not erase that serious violation. Charles then admitted something even harder. He confessed that the hidden contact routes he had quietly preserved over the years may have encouraged Harry to believe that rules could always be bypassed when emotions became intense enough. The king had tried to protect a bond between father and son. Instead, he may have taught his own son that every closed door contained a secret entrance. The letter revealed one final truth. Harry was not asking for a public role, restored official duties, or any royal announcement. His request was smaller and far more painful. One private meeting with Charles and William, where he would not be treated as a representative, a claimant, or a former working royal. A working royal is a family member who performs official duties on behalf of the monarch. William listened carefully, then set his condition. Such a meeting could happen one day, but only after Harry accepted in writing that he could never again use the Prince of Wales title, palace language, or private family promises to gain any form of access. Charles folded the letter carefully and placed it inside a plain drawer, rather than the official evidence file. The words belonged to the family. The false authorization belonged to the crown. By dawn, they had finally separated Harry's personal plea from his public act. But outside Windsor, only the act was visible, and the world was already preparing its verdict. The conflict had taken place behind guarded doors, but its consequences reached the public before breakfast. One document, one borrowed title, and one furious royal response became a national argument about loyalty, desperation, and royal power. Some people saw Harry as a son who had been denied every peaceful route home. Others saw an unforgivable attempt to impersonate the authority of Britain's future king. Then a single newspaper front page transformed the family rupture into one defining public image. The palace released a brief statement confirming that an unauthorized access request using the Prince of Wales designation had been formally rejected. The designation was the official title identifying William as the direct heir, so using it without his permission created both a serious security risk and a direct challenge to his authority. The statement also confirmed that royal security procedures had been significantly strengthened. It did not accuse Harry of forgery, but every carefully chosen sentence made one point completely clear. William had approved nothing. Charles watched the first morning broadcasts without speaking. The king knew the public would see a monarch defending institutional discipline, not a father who had opened his son's letter only hours earlier. That private act remained entirely hidden. His mercy belonged to the family. His decision belonged to the crown. William felt relief when the statement successfully protected his office. But the victory carried no comfort at all. The future king watched his relationship with Harry reduced to a public contest between a powerful heir and an excluded brother. He had defended his title successfully. Yet every headline reminded him of exactly what the family had lost. The story exploded when a major newspaper appeared with the words, "Not in my name," printed boldly above an image of Windsor's closed gates. Broadcasters held up the front page during live coverage as a small crowd gathered near the castle entrance. Some defended Harry's desperation. Others firmly demanded that no royal family connection should ever excuse the misuse of official authority. A royal commentator sharpened the entire debate during a recorded television segment. Harry did not merely knock on the family door. He arrived carrying William's key. The phrase spread within minutes. It appeared across broadcasts, online discussions, and evening headlines, turning a deeply complex family wound into one single, unforgettable accusation. Public sympathy shifted again when palace staff confirmed through a documented briefing that Harry had been seeking a private family conversation, not a restored official royal role. His motive suddenly appeared far more human. His method did not. Charles refused all demands for a harsher public condemnation. He would protect William's title, but he would not humiliate his younger son beyond the facts already released. The gates, the headlines, and the broadcasts had already judged the incident from the outside. Now Charles would issue the only verdict that truly mattered, inside the family itself. Charles's final decision did not restore Harry, and it did not erase him. The king refused to confuse love with permission, or punishment with permanent hatred. Harry would remain his son, but he would never again be allowed to force access through another man's title. William's authority would stand fully protected. The monarchy's rules would remain completely intact, and the family, though still deeply wounded, would finally understand the clear boundary separating private reconciliation from any official royal return. Charles sent a formal decision confirming that the Windsor authorization was entirely invalid. The use of William's title was completely unacceptable, and every informal route into the royal household would remain permanently closed. A formal decision was an official written ruling carrying the full authority of the monarch. It made clear that Harry would not regain automatic entry, official duties, palace representation, or the right to speak through the authority of any working royal. The king added something entirely separate. Beneath the official ruling, he placed a handwritten personal note, meant only for his son. Charles wrote that the bond between father and child had not been permanently destroyed. A private conversation could still happen one day, but only after Harry accepted the conditions and fully acknowledged the harm done to William. William agreed not to block that future meeting. The prince understood that forgiveness might one day become possible on a personal level, but he firmly refused to let reconciliation become a route back to institutional power. The office of the heir had to remain fully protected, because staff, security teams, and the entire future of the monarchy depended on knowing with absolute certainty whose authority was real. Harry answered through a signed written acknowledgement. He admitted that he had acted without William's permission, and promised never again to use the Prince of Wales title, office language, private correspondence, or family promises to secure any form of access. That acknowledgement ended the dispute over responsibility. It did not repair the family, but it stopped the denial. Charles then approved the final consequences. The intermediary was permanently barred from all royal communication systems. Every dormant account was fully disabled. The old security loophole was permanently closed, and no forgotten administrative template could ever again carry the weight of a living royal title. Harry read the handwritten personal note alone. He placed the official rejection on one side and the personal message on the other. At last, he understood the difference clearly. He had not been erased as a son, but he had permanently lost the right to force himself back as a prince. The gates remained closed. William's title remained entirely his own, and Charles made his final choice with absolute clarity. The monarchy would not bend, but the father would never stop loving his son. Thanks for watching Royal Zone. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like, and we will see you in the very next one.